In this video, you will see how the position property works. I have an HTML document with 5 HTML elements. I have a banner, a heading level 1, a heading level 2, and 2 paragraphs. Notice that I have background colors placed inside every element. Whenever you are doing any type of page layout, the only way you can actually see where that element stops and starts is by either putting in a background color or an outline around it. I encourage you to do this as a way to debug your code as you are developing. These elements are placed in what is called the normal flow. They execute on the web page in the order in which they are written in the HTML code, from first to last. As we see here, the banner is at the top, the last paragraph is at the bottom. If I were to code in position : absolute for the H2 element, notice where it winds up. It is actually sitting on top of the paragraph, and you can think of this as being on top of the web page. What absolute positioning does, it takes it out of the normal flow and it puts it on top of the web page. It doesn't know where to put it. You didn't tell it where to put it, so it's putting it wherever it thinks it should be. You generally would code a top and a left property based on where you want this element to be from the upper left-hand coordinate. Notice that because it is taken out of the normal flow, it is no longer on the web page. Notice that the width is only as large as the text. By default, we know that a heading level element is 100% the width of its web page. It no longer is because it is no longer part of the web page. You can think of it as sitting on top of the browser. So this is the main concept of what happens when you absolutely position something. This is why you do not use absolute positioning for page layout. You use it for special effects once you understand how it works. Now I am coding in 0 pixels from the top, 20 pixels from the left. However, our H2 element is now placed in this position. It is still not a width of 100%. Should we wish to do that, we would need to add that. I have just placed those same positioning properties to the paragraph. Notice in the normal flow of the HTML document, this orange paragraph sits between the heading level 2 and the green paragraph. Again, absolute positioning takes it out of the normal flow and places it on top of the web page. Essentially, now I'm going to relatively position my orange paragraph. Relative positioning does not take it out of the normal flow. You see my orange paragraph still is where it is in the normal flow. Static positioning is the default. It is where it normally should be. Notice, even though I set a top and left, my orange paragraph did not move, because static essentially means there is no positioning. Fixed positioning is similar to absolute positioning. Number 1, it takes it out of the normal flow. Notice my orange paragraph is no longer between my H2 element and my green paragraph in the HTML code normal flow. It also places it on top of the web page. The only reason that this orange paragraph has a width is because it has text inside it. The difference between absolute positioning and fixed positioning is that fixed positioning keeps it in place. Notice I have a scroll bar. Therefore, the page will scroll while the paragraph stays in place. When I change this back to absolute positioning, notice the paragraph moves with the rest of the page. So absolute positioning has its place in web development, and so does fixed positioning. One thing about absolute positioning, it positions the element to the upper left corner of the web page. We might not want it to do that. We might want it to be positioned relative to an element. How can we do that? I have just changed my code from a paragraph to a section and now added a footer. And as you can see, we have a footer inside there. And I will just explain how we can use relative positioning and absolute positioning together. Supposing I wanted to strategically position this footer somewhere inside this section. In order to do that, the section element has to have positioning. In this case, it would have relative positioning. Relative positioning means it just is where it is unless we set a top or left value. In this case, we don't need to do that. All we need to do is set position relative, and that enables us to move that footer anywhere we want inside this section. So we have a relatively positioned parent, which enables us to absolutely position a child. So if I set position relative to my section and position absolute with a top and left value to my footer, you can see that the footer is absolutely positioned to its parent, the parent being the relatively positioned container. The position relative to the section, you see that our footer is now absolutely positioned to the browser window. So by using a relative parent, it enables us to absolutely position any content inside that element